Israel's Independent Civilian Commission of Inquiry has released a highly critical report into the tragic and deadly October 7, 2023, attacks by Hamas, blaming key political and military leaders for their failure to prevent the massacre that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Israeli citizens. The Commission's findings place the primary responsibility for the security failures on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former defense ministers, and the heads of Israel's security services, including military and intelligence officials. In its scathing assessment, the Commission stated that the entire Israeli government had failed its primary mission of ensuring the safety and protection of its citizens. The October 7 attacks, which saw Hamas launch a coordinated assault across multiple Israeli border towns, caught Israel's defense and intelligence apparatus off guard. The Hamas militants breached Israel's fortified security barriers and carried out mass killings, taking hostages and engaging in widespread destruction. This event, which has been called the most devastating attack on Israel in decades, raised serious questions about the preparedness and effectiveness of Israel's security systems, given the extensive intelligence gathered in the months leading up to the attack. The Commission's inquiry revealed that Israeli intelligence agencies, including Mossad and Shin Bet, had gathered multiple pieces of information that suggested a significant Hamas attack was imminent. However, despite these warnings, the government and security forces failed to take decisive action or implement necessary defenses. The Commission concluded that there was a lack of coordination and preparedness between the various branches of Israel's security infrastructure. There was no unified response to the mounting threat, which allowed Hamas to execute its plan with devastating success. One of the most damning aspects of the report is its critique of the Israeli leadership's complacency and disregard for security warnings. Intelligence services had tracked Hamas communications, intercepted plans, and even detected signs of unusual troop movements. Despite this, the political and military leadership did not take the necessary steps to fortify Israel's defenses or prepare for the worst-case scenario. As a result, the country's military was overwhelmed by the scale and speed of the attack. The report found that Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, while effective in intercepting rockets, was not enough to prevent the ground invasion and coordinated raids by Hamas militants who breached multiple security zones. The Commission's report also highlights the poor communication between Israel's military and intelligence agencies. There were breakdowns in sharing critical information, and key decision-makers failed to act on the intelligence provided. While the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, had the resources and capabilities to respond quickly, the lack of clear leadership and strategic direction led to confusion and delay. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, security forces struggled to organize a cohesive response, resulting in a high number of casualties and widespread panic. The report holds Netanyahu personally accountable for the failures, criticizing his leadership and questioning his handling of national security matters, particularly in the months leading up to the attacks. Netanyahu, who was serving as prime minister at the time, has faced ongoing pressure for his role in the failures, with opponents arguing that he prioritized political goals over national security preparedness. The report calls for a re-evaluation of the structure and leadership of Israel's security agencies, as well as recommendations for strengthening the coordination between the military, intelligence, and government officials to avoid similar lapses in the future. In addition to the blame directed at Netanyahu and his government, the Commission also criticized former defense ministers and military officials who were in positions of power during the period leading up to the attacks. The report specifically points to former defense ministers who were accused of failing to adequately fund and equip Israel's defense forces, as well as intelligence leaders who did not escalate the urgency of the threat to the highest levels of government. The Commission's findings have prompted widespread debate in Israel, with many citizens and political leaders calling for accountability and reforms. Public outrage has mounted over the high number of casualties and the government's failure to protect civilians despite having intelligence about the threat. Some are demanding that Netanyahu resign over his handling of national security, while others have called for a complete overhaul of Israel's security leadership. Military and intelligence officials are also facing scrutiny for their inability to prevent the attack, despite the available intelligence. The report also makes several recommendations for reform, including improving the integration of intelligence and military forces, enhancing communication between agencies, and ensuring that all security measures are adequately funded and prepared for emergencies. The inquiry stresses that Israel's defense systems must be updated to handle evolving threats, particularly in an age of cyber warfare and hybrid conflicts that could bypass traditional military defenses. In response to the Commission's findings, Netanyahu has defended his leadership, asserting that the attack was unprecedented in scale and that no one could have predicted the tactics used by Hamas. However, the report's harsh criticism of his government's handling of security issues has left many Israelis questioning his capacity to lead during times of crisis. The public outcry and political pressure following the report's release have further complicated Netanyahu's position, with calls for investigations into individual officials' roles in the security failures. The October 7 attacks and the Commission's aftermath have exposed deep divisions within Israeli politics and raised serious concerns about the effectiveness of the nation's security apparatus. The implications of the report extend beyond political accountability, as they challenge the very foundations of Israel's military and intelligence operations. As the country grapples with the consequences of the massacre and the revelations in the Commission's findings, Israel faces a critical moment of reflection on its security policies, leadership, and the need for reform to safeguard against future threats. The investigation and its recommendations are likely to shape the future of Israel's defense strategy for years to come.